Hello everyone, my name is Eli the Wizard. Thank you for coming to the channel. Today we're going to be discussing a pretty high level bracket 3 commander deck specifically for Voja, Jaws of the Conclave. It reads Vigilance, Trample, and Ward 3. Whenever Voja attacks, put X +1/+1 counters on each creature you control, where X is the number of elves you control, and draw a card equal to the number of wolves you control. Now there are three main strategies when it comes to building Voja that I've seen. One is counter duplication, so you're trying to play doubling spells that put double X ++1 counters on creatures. You're doing a wolf elf tribal deck, or you're just trying to go aggro, so you're just trying to swing with Voja 2-3 times per turn. Each one is justified, and I think that you can build a pretty solid deck around any one of those strategies. For this video specifically, we're going to be focusing on elf and wolf tribal. Just a friendly warning before we kind of just dive into the way that I imagine this deck, the way that I've built it myself, and the way that I play Voja, is that Elf Tribal in general is going to be very fast. It is playing elves consistently turn 1, turn 2, and you are ramping insanely fastly. If that's even a word, fastly. The goal is to try to out-mana your opponents as quick as possible and play big spells that are going to allow you to combo off or play multiple spells and try to dig for your game changers and or cards that are going to kind of give you the win. That being said, there have been a lot of arguments with this deck that it's a bracket 4 deck. I don't believe that to be true. And the reasoning why is because one, it doesn't have a whole lot of interaction in Naya, so green, white, and red. There's not a whole lot to stop removal, which we'll discuss in detail and how we kind of get around that. But if someone mana drains your Voja when you've tapped out for 5 mana, you kind of just sit there for a while. It doesn't have the key components that you would see in a bracket 4, meaning it doesn't have your food chain squeak combo where you're just going infinite. The majority of times you're winning in this deck is just by swinging wide. The specific deck that I really call for this deck is more of a Voltron go wide. I'm just trying to make the elves and the wolf big enough to make everyone scared and swing at, turn them sideways, the typical green strategy. Because of that, I've always stated it's a bracket 3. You'll lose a lot of times whenever someone plays a Toxic Deluge and wipes the board, or any type of board wipe. Cyclonic Rift is another one. Because elves have summoning sickness, you can't just keep pumping them out. So if someone bounces all the cards to your hand, you're kind of sitting there with 9-10 cards, and you're discarding some really good elves. But that's just before we start. There's always going to be interpretations of people's bracket systems, but from what I've seen in this deck is it's consistently with no interaction on the table, meaning the other 3 players don't interact with you at all. You're maybe swinging turn 6, turn 7 for the win if you're not playing, if you don't get a good spell like Seize the Day or Chroma's Will. Finally, I just want to say that if this deck looks a little too expensive, I'm a high proponent of proxying. I think it's really important when you're first learning a deck in any ways in the beginning to not really buy so much cards that you may or may not use, or you may not even like this commander. So I'm a big proponent of just proxying the decks, seeing how it runs, switching out cards for what you do and don't like, and then just testing it multiple times until you find what you like. And then, by all means, go out and acquire the cards. But this is not me telling you to open up your wallet, break the bank, just so that you can kind of meet the expectations of the deck. Okay, so let's get actually into the strategies for the deck. So number 1 is ramping. We're going to try to get as much mana on the table as physically possible and beat all of our other opponents with big spells and or continuously keep throwing down more and more elves and or save mana for interactions when the time comes. That's the number 1 strategy going into this. Number 2 is tutoring for the answer. So we're going to play a lot of tutors in this deck. The recent revision of the bracket system allows for multiple tutors to be played inside of a bracket 3 deck. The only one to that exception in green is Worldly Tutor, which is a game changer, and that will not be in this deck. And then lastly, the last step is we're going to win. We're going to try swing wide. We're going to try to deal lethal damage to one individual with Voja and or multiple individuals if you get multiple combats. And the other ones, we'll leave them to the elves. All right. So the first strategy is we're going to ramp. So we're trying to throw down as much as we can as quickly as we can. First, we're going to go up with the non-elf ramp cards. So Soul Ring, got to include it. Nature's Lore, another perfect one. It can help get us to forest. It also enters untapped. Next is Furdok Core. So this is a great card from the new Lorwyn set that counts as a changeling. And the importance part that I want to point out is Voja doesn't specifically say for each elf creature you control or each wolf creature you control. It says only elves you control and wolves you control. So that's an important factor. So just with Verdant Core just being on the battlefield, you will get a Voja trigger, even though that you don't pay the 4 for it to become a creature. So it's a great mana rock. Starting with our mana dorks, we're going to have Fenhorn Elves. It taps for 1 green mana. Great opening hand. Elvish Mystic does the exact same thing. And then finally, we're going to go to Llanowar Elves. All these elves you want in your opening hand so you can ramp as fast as possible. Next, we're going to move on to mana elves that combo with Voja. Devoted Druid says tap for a green mana, put a -1/1 counter on this creature, untap this creature. This works perfectly in the Voja deck because the more counters that you put on, the more that you can tap Devoted Druid and untap it, put a -1/1 counter on it, canceling out the positive 1/1 counter that you just put on it with Voja, and netting a positive mana source. So it's a great elf to have in your opening hand. Moving on, so we're going to go with Gyre Sage next. It's tap, add green mana equal to the number of +1/+1 counters on Gyre Sage. It does have an evolve trigger. When a creature enters with a greater power or toughness, you do get automatically put a +1/+1 counter. So when Voja comes in, it's going to automatically trigger Gyre Sage and or any of your bigger elves that are coming in later turns. So this is a perfect combo piece. You're going to be potentially tapping it for insane amounts of mana when Voja starts coming out. Moving on to our next elf is Incubation Druid. So it's going to have tap, add 1 mana of any type that a land you control could produce. If Incubation has a +1/+1 counter on it, add 3 mana of that type instead. It does have an adapt trigger that I don't really necessarily use unless it's really slowed down or someone played a board wipe. This is going to combo again perfectly with Voja that cares about putting +1/+1 counters. So now you're potentially tapping Incubation Druid for 3 mana of any color that a land you control could produce. Next is Selvala, Heart of the Wilds. I absolutely love this card. So whenever another creature enters, you may draw a card if its power is greater than each other creature's power. So it's a trigger that everyone gets on the board. It is a draw, so plus or minus, we're not really worried about that. Really, it's pay 1 green mana, tap it, add X mana, any combination of cards where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So at minimum, if you have Selvala out the turn before, you're tapping it for 5 mana, any combination of colors. This instantly is a fantastic card, and the stronger Voja gets, or the stronger your elves gets, it's going to tap for more and more mana. And we can kind of go into combos, but Selvala is a great choice when you're tutoring. It's a great elf to have. If it's in your opening hand, I would seriously recommend keeping it. Next is Marwyn, the Nurturer, another absolute fantastic elf. It's going to, whenever it has an ETB trigger, whenever another elf enters the battlefield, you get a +1/+1 counter on Marwyn, and then you can tap it to add green mana equal to Marwyn's power. Another perfect combo piece in Voja, who's going to make Marwyn stronger as Voja attacks. So you're potentially tapping Marwyn. I've tapped Marwyn up to 12 mana at sometimes. So absolutely perfect elf. Great combo piece. Great card to potentially tutor for if you're low on mana. But you have Voja out. Maybe you were late turn 9, 10, and you just need an elf out there, just 1 or 2. Marwyn is a great choice. Moving on to Marwyn's cousin, the Viridian Joiner. It's just as good as Marwyn, but it doesn't really have that ETB effect with other elves to give it the +1/+1 counter, but we're still adding green mana equal to its power. So same thing, as Voja gets increasingly stronger, this card is going to tap for more mana, which lets you tap it and put in an insane amount of elves, which makes Voja stronger. Vice versa, it goes back and forth. You can see how this kind of gets out of hand really fast. And what I love about these things is that they become the targets over Voja. So people are worried about removing your mana base rather than your commander, which is obviously perfect. And with Voja having Ward 3, your elves become targets a little bit more easier, right? Because someone can source the Plowshare or Path to Exile your elf and kind of wipe your mana base versus taking out your commander, which is not bad, right? It's not a bad trade-off for us. We love it. We want our wolf out. We want him to get bigger and bigger. And that's kind of one of the ways we do it, is put the target onto something else. Okay, moving on to creatures that are going to generate us mana but aren't like crazy combos with Voja. They're just your typical like 2-3 mana drop elf that just kind of helps put us ahead in the battlefield. A couple of key notes is that you'll notice in this deck I don't have a lot of wolves. And that's because as I've been playing Voja and I've kind of elevated my thinking, I've really gone more with changelings because you get both the elf trigger and the wolf trigger when Voja attacks. So you're going to see that I practically don't have any wolves in this deck just because of how much I've played Voja over time and lessons that I've kind of learned. Moving on to other cards though that help us ramp, just not super effectively. First off is Mutable Explorer. So when it enters the battlefield, it's a changeling and it's gonna create us a Mutavault token, which is a land token that taps for colorless, or you can pay 1 generic mana to make it become a 2/2 creature with all creature types until end of turn. It's still a land. So this is going to not only give us another land, which is great because we love permanent-esque type mana ramps, but secondarily it's going to create another changeling effect. So we're potentially getting 2 changelings on a turn, which means we have 2 elves and 2 wolves. So we get card draw and +1/+1 counters. It's a great card. Next, we're going to move on to a card that does something very similar to Wood Elves. So when it ETBs, you're going to search your library for a forest card, put it on the battlefield. Again, the key word here is not tapped. And remember, forest, what we want to do when we're building our land base is we want a lot of shock lands, and we want a lot of dual type lands to help fix our mana base. So whenever we're needing a mountain or plains, we can just go grab a Stomping Grounds or a Temple Garden to help fix us. So they're great cards. And again, we love that permanent-esque type mana on the battlefield. Next is we have Llanowar Tribe. Great card, taps for 3 green mana, easy ramp. Then we have Nodvine Mystic, which is you're gonna pay 1 generic to tap it for a Naya. Great ramp, easy. A little bit hard to fix on the mana base, but still great to include in this deck. Okay, the next card we'll be talking about just for a little bit, it's Skyshroud Elf. So it's going to tap, add 1 green mana. It's a 2 mana elf, and you can pay 1 generic mana, and you can add red or white to your mana pool. Now the key thing that I want to bring up in regards to this card, and the reason why it's been included over other 2 mana elves that can tap for 1 mana of any color, is that it specifically has the mana sync ability. And so that's just anything that allows us to convert our mana from one color to another. So whenever we talk about the infinite combo in this deck later on, you'll see that this is going to be one of your key points to throw down, because it doesn't have a tap ability, it's just pay. So it's actually an excellent elf to include in this deck for whenever we need to swap our manas to a different color, to even pay for a different spell that's in our hand. Maybe we need another white to do an Orim's Chant, and we want to pay the kicker cost, right? So absolutely must include in this deck. We obviously have to include Bloom Tender, which is going to tap for each color among permanents you control, and you add 1 mana of that color. So the best that we can get is 3 mana if we have a red, white, and green permanent, and or Voja out on the battlefield. Next, we're going to go into mana dorks that scale based on the creatures on the battlefield. So you have Priest of Titania that will tap 1 green for each elf on the battlefield. Absolutely great card. Then we have Elvish Archdruid, which does the exact same thing, but gives a static +1/+1 to all other elves you control. So these creatures are going to rely on just pumping out as many elves as possible. Last is Circle of Dreams Druid, which is going to give you 1 green mana for each creature you control. More elves you put down, the more mana you can tap for. Absolutely great elf. Alright, so we're out of the ramp section now, and we're moving on to tutoring for the answer. So this definitely depends on what type of board state that we're in, what other decks you're playing against. So we'll walk through each one of the key pieces that I kind of look for and tutor for. Most of them are creatures, and we'll talk about that. First tutor I want to talk about is the only land tuner in the deck, and that's Vibrance. The great thing about this card is we can spend 2 red to kind of shoot anything on the board for 3 damage, right? So someone has an Orcish Bowmaster, and they keep pinging you as you're drawing for Voja. You don't want to take that out. But secondarily is it's also a land tutor, and there's different lands that are definitely viable in this deck that you can kind of see towards the end that we'll talk about. So it's all around great tutor and or damage spell. Next is Eldorami's Call, or Lifelong Friendship. All in all, great tutor spell, puts the creature card into your hand. You do have to reveal it, of course, but 2 mana, grabs the creature, awesome spell, instant speed. Next is Nature's Rhythm. So search the library for a creature card with mana value extra less. The great thing about this one is it does put it onto the battlefield. And it has a harmonized ability, so you can cast it basically twice during your turn if you have enough mana for it. So absolute great spell. Next is Court of Calling, which it's great tutor. It's got a Convoke, which helps us pay for its cost. The best thing about this is it puts it directly onto the battlefield, and it is at instant speed instead of sorcery speed. Celestial Reunion is another one, sorcery speed. It's kind of like a Green Sun Zenith, but you have to behold 2 creatures of the same creature type. Lo and behold, we're playing Elf Tribal. This fits perfectly into our deck, so it's going to ETB on the battlefield. Another great card. Next is Green Sun Zenith. The only downside with Green Sun Zenith is it is sorcery speed and it's only a green creature. Next is Eldritch Evolution. It's a good tutor, but it does come with an additional cost of making us sacrifice one of our elves. Not a big deal if we can get like an Elvish Mystic or a Fenhorn Elves. Next is a tutor I don't see played that very often, but it's Signal the Clans. It's a great tutor. It's going to allow us to find 3 different creature cards, reveal them to our opponents, and we choose at random which go to our hand. This is a great versatility, and for 2 mana at instant speed, again, just can't be beat. Formidable Speaker is an elf that has an ETB. If you discard a card, you can search for a creature card, reveal it, put it in your hand. It also combos really well with Gaia's Cradle, which we'll talk about as one of our lands, and or another elf on the battlefield that's generate insane types of mana. So this is a great card. It is a must include. It's one of the new Lorwyn cards. You got to have it. Last tutor is Fauna Shaman. So you can pay a green, tap it, and discard a creature card, search your library for a creature card, reveal it, put in your hand, then shuffle. Great option. The only problem is that it does require us to have creature cards, and we're going to lose an elf in the graveyard. Again, the upside though is if your starting hand maybe has one elf that you don't necessarily need, maybe you have an Elvish Mystic, a Fenhorn Elves, you only really want one of them, then this is a great option to cycle through to grab some of the more powerful elves, some of the ones that are giving us net positives like a Marwyn. So it's a great option. Okay, so I've talked about all the tutors, I've talked about the mana base. So what are we exactly tutoring for? What is the answer? Well, first off, this is going to just depend on the board state and what decks you're going up against, right? Are we playing against a blue control deck? Or are we playing against a mono black hate deck, right? So the next cards are just going to be options to go fetch for when you have tutors in your hand. This is where I'm likely going to spend most of the time in the video. And the reasoning is that what you tutor for completely depends on who you're playing against and what decks you're playing against, right? Are you playing against a mono blue control deck? Are you playing against a mono blue hate deck? Is someone throwing down multiple board wipes? Is someone targeting your elves consistently, right? All that's going to change what we're going to tutor for and how we're going to get there. So this is where majority of the piloting comes into Voja, rather than just playing a bunch of ramp spells and playing a bunch of tutors to go grab some good elves, right? You want to make sure you get the right targets for the right situation. First target is going to be Roaming Thrones, okay? So it's got Ward 2. When it enters the battlefield, you're obviously going to name Wolves because you want that additional Voja trigger. The other thing that you need to understand is Ward is a triggered ability, right? So someone targets Voja, the Ward trigger goes onto the stack whether they pay the 3. If they don't, it gets countered. Because of that, and it's being a triggered ability, having Roaming Throne on the battlefield is going to make Voja turn from Ward 3 to Ward 6 if there's nothing else, any modification for his ward cost. So this is a great spell to go get if you want to double your attack triggers and also add more protection to Voja. Next is a new card from Lorwyn set, Hexing Squelcher. Obviously, we're going to play this card because it gives us Voja another ward trigger. So it'll be ward 3 and pay 2 life. And then none of our spells can be countered. Absolutely great card. Next is still a good version. It is an elf, so it's Alsar Shepherd. Its green spells can't be countered. So again, we're dealing with a mono blue deck, or you think someone's stacking up on counters. This is probably one of those cards that I'm going to mulligan to or tutor pretty early for when they're tapped out for mana to make sure it goes through and that Voja can resolve with no problems. There are only 2 non-elf creatures in this deck, and that's Hexing Squelcher and Frenzy Baloth. So this one goes a little bit deeper into creature spells you control can't be countered, and combat damage can't be prevented. So this is a key target whenever you're playing against someone who's got a Spore Frog on the battlefield, maybe some type of graveyard loop, so you theorize that they're going to keep playing fog effects over and over and over again. Or you have someone who's got a Glacial Chasm on the battlefield and can't take damage. This is a perfect way to get through that. Now this next card, you really want to use an instant tutor that puts onto the battlefield like Court of Calling, and that's Tadru Preserver. Its spells and abilities your opponent's control can't cause you to sacrifice permanents. So this gets around the Eldrazi player with an Annihilator 4 trigger, and gets around that mono black player or someone who has black in their color scheme, causing you to sacrifice permanents whenever you do damage or whenever a creature dies on the battlefield. Absolute perfect card to grab on Court of Calling, and you can watch everyone else sacrifice their creatures, and your elves are so good. Next creature that we're going to tutor for is Bramblewood Paragon. Yes, it's got an ETB trigger that we don't really care about. Really, it's the bottom line. Each creature in control with a +1/+1 counter on it has trample. This is definitely one of those ones where you set up the board, all of your elves are 10/10s. Maybe you're going up against someone with a token deck, or maybe you're just ready to swing for lethal. Bramblewood Paragon is absolutely imperative. It's automatic on the static ability on the battlefield, so you don't need to wait for any triggers or anything like that. You just go, you grab them, and then you swing for lethal. The next card that you want to grab is if you're going up against a white or red player, and that's Eldrami, Lord of the Leaves. It's all elves gain Forest Walk, and elves can't be the target of spells or abilities. So it gives them Shroud. Now be careful, obviously, playing this card because you're not going to be able to target your elves for the rest of the game. However, Voja's triggers does get around Shroud, one. And then number two is you're really just protecting all your elves from just getting sniped the entire game. One thing I want you to know about this card is it has been errated, so it is an elf. In fact, it is 100% an elf creature type, but secondarily, it's all other elves. Eldrami does not give himself the protection. Sometimes I do have to point that out to individuals when I'm playing the game, only just as fair because it has been errated. Next card that we're going to potentially tutor for is Copperhorn Scout. It is whenever it attacks, you untap each other creature you control. This is a great way to keep your elves open and your mana open. So I would only grab this kind of when, mid game when I have a lot of cards in hand. I have a lot of things I want to do, but not a lot of mana to do it. Copperhorn Scout is definitely a great target for one of the many tutors you have. Gangling Stomping is a new card. It's a changeling. It's a 4/2 with trample. I've only tutored for it a couple instances whenever Bramblewood Paragon has kind of been removed from the battlefield, but it's definitely an elf, one of the very few elves with trample. It's a great option if you're just going for something quick and easy. Now, if you've established your board state, Voja's on the board, and you're like, I have a tutor, what do I do for it? I don't really know. I want to tell you, this is the #1 target in the deck and something you should always be trying to get onto the board, and that is Shala and Halar. This is by far the game closer of this entire deck. So it's Flying Vigilance. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on a creature you control, Shala and Halar deals that much damage to target opponent. Now, these are individual triggers for each creature, and it scales based on how many +1/+1 counters will put on that creature. So for instance, if you have 6 elves on the battlefield, you are getting 7 triggers, because Voja obviously puts it on himself, of 6 sets of damage. So you're potentially shooting anyone for 42 damage and sets of 6. You do have to shoot them in accordance with how many counters are put in once. So for instance, you cannot split the 6 damage from 3 to one opponent and 3 to the other. You have to shoot it equal to the number of +1/+1 counters that are put on each creature. You're not allowed to split them up. It's an absolute game changer. Usually when I get Shala and Halar into the battlefield and I'm able to swing with Voja, it's pretty much game over. So now at this point, you just go for the win, right? You swing with Voja, you turn things sideways, you do the typical green thing. Now there's certain cards in the deck that can also help you get there, and we'll kind of talk about those next. Next is Maxwood Nexus. It's a great card, turns all your creatures into every creature type. So now you have, 5 elves and 5 wolves. You're drawing insane amounts of cards. You're putting an insane amount of counters on everything. You're getting all the answers that you need. The absolute great artifact to include in this deck. So next is a great card, and he joins up in the only enchantment in the deck. So when it ETBs, you're going to be able to shoot someone, a creature or a planeswalker, for 5 damage, but really it's if a triggered ability of a legendary creature you control triggers, that triggers an additional time. So what we care about for Voja is his attack trigger, and then again, the ward ability. So with Roaming Throne and Annie joins up on the battlefield, Voja goes from ward 3 to ward 9, making it almost impossible for someone to target it and remove it. Next card is one I don't often see played, is Lava Spur Boots. It gives it +1/+0, haste, and ward 1. So Voja will effectively become ward 4. Go back to the previous example where we have Annie joins up on the battlefield and Roaming Thrones with wolves named. Voja is now ward 12. It's going to basically be impossible for anyone to target Voja at any point in time. They're going to have to play some other type of spells to get around it. Next is good old Swiftfoot Boots. So Hexproof and Haste does have that equipped 1 cost, but that's fine. We do enjoy being able to still target Voja at some points, which is why it's over Lightning Greaves. Speaking of Lightning Greaves, this is great for your elves when they ETB onto the battlefield to be able to auto-equip them and tap them for mana. I generally don't put them on Voja. Next is another good piece of equipment, Brotherhood Regalia. So it's going to give Voja an additional ward 2. It's going to make it an assassin, and it can't be blocked. And it's only got a 1 equipped cost. Absolute perfect card, making it unblockable, meaning you can swing at anyone for pretty much lethal. And remember what we talked about, Annie joins up and Roaming Thrones. Now Voja is a 15 ward cost, with Brotherhood Regalia equipped and the other 2 on the battlefield. So next card is Finale Devastation. If you got this in hand, you're able to get X equal to 10, where it's creatures you control get +X until end of turn, and haste. It's pretty much a game ender. Usually for this, I'll go get Bramblewood Paragon, giving everything trample, and just swing for lethal. Next game ender is a Chroma's Will. So if Voja's out on the battlefield, you only need them to be an 11/11 to one-shot somebody, since it gives them double strike. And it gives them, lifelink and indestructible, protection from all colors until end of turn. Usually, generally speaking, this is going to end everyone's life. So great card, wins you the game. Next card we're going to discuss is Seize the Day. So it's untap target creature after this main phase or additional combat phase followed by additional main phase. The great thing about this card is it's going to have flashback. So all you need to do is target an elf that you control. Most specifically, and the easiest one is Bloom Tender. It's going to be able to pay for its flashback cost. So you're looking at 3 combat phases and 4 main phases out of this card. Another great reason that I chose this card over Aggravated Assault is that I found that the loops for paying for 2 red pips were just a lot more difficult than Seize the Day. And generally speaking, 3 combat phases is going to get the job done whenever you're playing this spell. Alright, next card I want to talk about, which is the only infinite combo in this deck, is Staff of Domination. Now the way this card is going to work is you're going to have a elf on the battlefield that taps for 5 mana. You're going to tap the elf and float the 5 mana, and you're going to pay 3 into Staff of Domination to untap the elf. And then you're going to pay 1 into the staff to untap itself. You've now generated 1 net mana positive, and you're just going to keep doing that until you generate infinite mana. Then from there, you're going to tap the staff to gain 2 life, and then untap it. Keep doing that to where you gain infinite life. Then you're going to do infinite card draw. You're going to draw your whole deck, and then play whatever spells you want. Remember that one Sky Shroud elf that we referenced earlier? That's how you're going to get the mana from whatever color source you need to sink into it. And we have plenty of ways to stop anyone from interacting with us at that point. So finally, we're at the end of the deck. We talked about the win cons, we talked about our elves, we talked about our mana dorks. Now we're going to stop them from stopping you. Alright, so we're going to talk about interaction. First card on our list is the Game Changer, the One Ring. So it's indestructible. When it ETBs, you're going to have protection from everything until next turn. It's card draw. The only downside is that you're going to be taking damage on your upkeep. Not a lot of downside for this card. It's going to be massive, and one reason why it's one of our Game Changers. Next up, we have a Void Fate, which is a 1 green mana counterspell. Probably one of the very few counterspells that there are, and it really helps control players who are trying to enchant Voja. Next is Veil of Summer, which is an absolute great protection card. It's an instant, so if someone does cast a counterspell, you can do this in response to. You get a card draw, and then you gain hexproof from blue and black until end of turn. Absolutely great card, especially also if someone's targeting your commander with like a Deadly Rollick. Next card is Heroic Intervention, which really truly should be a game changer. It's one of the best green spells of all time. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, which includes your lands, of course. Absolutely fantastic card. Next way that we got to think about interaction is a lot of spells say target, and because of that we can use cards like Bolt Bend. So we're going to change the target of target spell or ability with a single target. So it's great to change the counter spell, to change the mana drain, path to exile. Changing the target of target spell works great. In that same mindset, we're going to have Redirect Lightning, which has an additional cost of pay 5 life or pay 2 additional mana. Not a big deal. Great way to stop a spell. Then lastly is a good old D-Swat, which is no longer a game changer, and it's free if we have our commander out. Moving out of the redirect, we're going on to Aurum Chant, which has the ability to stop a target player from casting spells this turn. It has an additional kicker cost that you can pay that stops them from attacking with creatures this turn. Absolutely great way to shut someone down who's potentially going for the win. You can use this both in an offensive way or a defensive way. Next one is Obscuring Haze. I find this is a great card. Not a lot of people play it, but it prevents all damage that will be dealt this turn by creatures your opponents control. So if you do want to swing at a player with Voja and they have a lot of Death Touchers, this is the perfect card to get around that. And or someone's swinging for the win, they're swinging for lethal. You can play Obscuring Haze. It's free if your commander's out. Absolutely great card. That's why I like it a little bit more than Fog. Next card we're going to talk about is Force of Vigor. It's one of the very few destroy effects that I have in this deck, and it's going to destroy up to 2 target artifacts or enchantments. So getting rid of a Ristic Study, getting rid of someone's Game Changer, getting rid of a Soul Ring, and when it's not your turn, you can pay an alternate cost of exiling a green card from your hand, which we have plenty of green cards. So I find it as a great interaction piece to kind of get rid of some of the other people's combo pieces or stop them from ramping. Next is Beast Within, a classic green removal spell for any target permanent, whether it be a land or someone's commander. Perfect answer. Collective Resistance is going to do the exact same thing, but we have the ability to escalate it, so we can destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, and the last bit is we can have a target creature gain hexproof and indestructible. So this is a great removal way of getting rid of, again, of key pieces and or giving Voja protection for that turn. Next are a few spells that are going to get us out of trouble. So Flawless Maneuver, again, if you control your commander, we can pay it for free. All creatures that we control gain indestructible until end of turn. Stops us from that board wipe. Next is the best white instant of all time, Teferi's Protection, or T-Pro. We're going to phase out. We're going to say bye to everyone. They can't touch us. They can't touch our permanents. Perfect way to get around any type of board wipe, to include an exile type-esque board wipe like Farewell. So that's it for interactions, guys. Hopefully that gives you enough ability to interact with whatever your opponents are casting. Remember, we're in Naya, so there's not a lot of counterspelling. We're just trying to deal with whatever is on the stack currently. Those cards should help in some way. Now we're going to move on to talking about the only board wipe that I have in this deck. Winnowing is a perfect new card from the Lorwyn set that really goes for a tribal-esque deck. It's got a Convoke to help you cast it, but for each player, you choose a creature that player controls, then each player chooses sacrifice all creatures that control that don't share a creature type with this chosen creature type they control. Now, this is not going to help you with someone playing sliver decks. However, majority of the time, there is that one offset creature that people have, even in tribal decks. Obviously, for us, it's Hexing Squelcher. So the reasons why I like this board wipe over others is, one, it says for each player you choose a creature. It doesn't say the word target, so we're not worried about a redirect or a deflecting SWAT. Number two is that it says sacrifice. It doesn't say destroy, so it gets around anyone who has hexproof and indestructible. So it kind of gets around your green players and your white players and your red players. So the only thing you really have to worry about is a blue player countering that spell. Which again, if we have Hexing Squelcher out, they're not countering anything. But the biggest downside is that you may have to sacrifice either your elves or your commander. It kind of depends on the flow of the game. Really, I wouldn't play this unless I have Maxwood Nexus out, in which I would then choose Wolves just in case someone did destroy the Maxwood Nexus in response to me casting the spell. So it is a little bit different than Damning Verdict, which I used to run, and that's destroy all creatures without +1/+1 counters on them. The problem is that there's a lot of decks nowadays that run +1/+1 counters, and so I found that over time, that board wipe spell really didn't do too great over and over and over again. Whereas Winnowing, I don't have to have any other creature or no other spells in hand. I don't have to worry about doing like a Flawless Maneuver and stacking it. I don't have to worry about giving my creatures indestructible. I can just play the spell, choose Wolves or choose Elves, and watch everyone else basically sacrifice their entire board, even if they have a Blightsteel Colossus on the battlefield. Alright, we're finally moving on to the last bit, which is lands. I'm not going to mention every land type. I'm just going to mention the couple that I believe that should be absolute includes in this deck. The first land I want to bring up, and the last game changer in this deck, is Gaea's Cradle. So it's tap, add green mana equal to the number of creatures you control. Absolute great card. You can tutor for this with Vibrance, so it's a great option to go for, and going to allow you to ramp even further depending on the number of creatures you have. Now, I understand not wanting to buy a Gaea's Cradle, so the next step is Avenda Waking Heaven, which allows you to station it for 12. It happens very early and very quickly, especially with Voja being on the battlefield. It's a great answer and great replacement for Gaea's Cradle. Next up is we have Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. So that's going to allow us to choose a color. We can add 1 mana of any color equal to the devotion of that color. Obviously, green is going to be the biggest one we're going with, so it has a very similar effect to Gaea's Cradle. We can pay 2 into it, maybe even use a Soul Rings mana, and then we can generate, hopefully, 4, 5, 6 green mana. Next is 3 Tree City. Obviously, if you're playing any type of tribal deck, you want to have 3 Tree City in there. Choosing Elves is going to be a great way to filter mana and grab a red or a white if you're missing it. Up next, we have Wirewood Lodge, which is pay 1 green mana, untap target elf. Absolutely great card to include, especially when you have Morrowind or you have any other Viridian Joiner, any other mana dork that's going to be tapping for an insane amount of mana, and you can untap it and do it again. Absolutely must include land. Next up is an elf-only land again from Lorwyn set that just got recently released, obviously naming Elf, and you can tap to add 1 mana of any color to cast an Elf spell. Great card. Next up is Counter Souls, which should be included in every commander deck and just allows your commander not to be countered. So take that, blue players. Next up is Mutavault. So it's good to have Mutable Explorer to make us a token, but we actually want the real card itself too, because we want those Elf and Wolf triggers. Next up is Yavimaya Cradle of Growth. So each land is a forest addition to their other types. Remember, if you remember Eldorami, Lord of the Leaves, they give all your elves Forest Walk, but it sure would be a shame if all of your opponent's lands turned into forests in addition to their type and couldn't block your elves. It would be a very big shame. Now moving on to interaction lands, one of my favorite of all time is Talon Gates of Madra. So it has an ETB effect that allows you to target one creature in and have it face out. And you can pay 4 to put it from your hand onto the battlefield. This is a great interaction piece that allows you to target Voja, and this is why I say I like to target Voja, and allow him to get out of any type of board wipe that may have been countered, or you may not have had the correct interaction in your hand. Talon Gates of Madra is an absolute great card to tutor for Vibrance and get out of any situation. Last but not least is Wasteland, Ghost Quarters, or Strip Mine. Any of those lands that kind of tap it, sacrifice to destroy non-basic land. I find in Magic a lot more people are running Glacial Chasm, which is a land that prevents all combat damage. It's got a cumulative upkeep of paying 2 life, but in the life gain decks, it doesn't really matter. I've just seen a lot more individuals selecting it as their game changer, and so I've kind of moved towards putting in some type of removal for that specific land, and then of course we can tutor for that. So we can tutor for Vibrance and then tutor for a Wasteland if someone is doing that combo on us. And that's kind of it, folks. So, thanks for watching. Thanks for taking this time to learn about my Voja deck. This is a small YouTube channel. I'm starting out, so this is kind of new for me. I'm sorry if the video editing isn't so great, but I love Magic. So you have any cards that you switched out or you like this deck and you're playing with it, please comment, let me know. The Moxfield deck list will be posted in the comments. I just appreciate all you guys' time. Thank you so much.